Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And I have Nick Greiner here with GreinerHealthSolutions.com. And Nick is a big fan of one meal a day. He does it himself. And so today our title is One Meal a Day, the One Meal a Day Metabolic Reset episode. So we're super excited to have you on, Nick. Tell listeners a little bit about you and what kind of knowledge you have in the intermittent fasting field.
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I was looking forward to this for such a long time. But this topic specifically for me, at least anyway, something I would say I'm probably most passionate about. A little bit of history, I guess, and how I got into this. My background is in exercise physiology and nutrition, and getting my doctorate in 2007. What I wanted to do was practice, we call it lifestyle medicine or concierge medicine, and one of the things about what I realized about food was, you want to be eating the right types of foods, of course, but how about meal frequency? And somebody had turned me on to the idea of intermittent fasting probably about 15 or so years ago. And from that point on, I remember it was a Sunday evening, and that night I read for probably 3.5 hours, 4 hours on intermittent fasting. I was on Mark Sisson's website. I was kind of bouncing from place to place and just reading about it. And to me, it was unbelievable because I come from a background, in my 20s, I was a competitive bodybuilder. I'm almost 44 years old. So it's been about 20 years. And, I was a big 7 meal a day guy, and I did that for the longest time. But when you start reading a little bit about what intermittent fasting is, the hormones, and when you close that eating window, all these amazing things start happening. So I incorporated myself, and then with patients. And from that point on, you just start seeing all these amazing things happen. For me, body composition changes, health markers improve. And you realize that for the great majority of the population, this is something that could work for them.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so for you, when did you start doing one meal a day, and how often would you say you do one meal a day every day? Would you say 6 out of 7 days a week? What about when you go on vacation?
Yeah, good questions. I started intermittent fasting, like I said, probably 12-ish years ago. And I started with 16/8, the 16-hour fasting window and 8-hour eating window. What that looked like for me was I was eating at noon and about 7 or 8 p.m. That was my window. And you learn, how your body feels, how it's working for you. And then I just, over the years, kind of slowly closed it. And I did the 16/8 for a long time. Then I did the 24, the 20-hour fast, 4-hour eating window. And typically the 4-hour eating window was usually only one meal anyway. I had a hard time getting 2 meals in a 4-hour window. And then it kind of evolved from that. Now, I was on strict one meal a day for probably 3 years. But as with everything, context, I would say I'm one meal a day, 5-6 days a week. And the other 2 days, honestly, it depends. So what I've been tinkering with for the past few months is I'll do one meal a day, 5-6 days a week. If I'm doing it 5, maybe on day 6, I'll do a 16/8. And maybe on day 7, I'll do kind of 3 meals throughout the day. I'll spread it out a little bit.
I like that, because that could be like Monday through Friday. You could just say, look, I'm just eating one meal a day, Monday through Friday. Saturday, I'm eating 2 meals. And then Sunday, I'm having three full meals that day.
Right. And honestly, I feel like some people call that the 5-2-2. And I do like it. And I think depending on the person, it can work well. Now, me or anybody else who maybe is very, very active, who trains a lot, you have to tinker with that. But one of the things I can tell you personally is that since I've been doing not so strict one meal a day, where I've been doing kind of the 5-2, most of the time when I do that, I end up losing a little bit more weight than when I stick strictly to the 24, the 1 meal a day. And there's something to be said about that. People talk a lot about adaptive thermogenesis. If you eat too much in a calorie deficit too often, your body will adjust and, things kind of slow down a little bit. And I know a lot of people that they don't eat enough too. That's definitely something that I don't see as often as people eating too much. But that is a thing. Once, I'll be honest with you, when I was doing 1 meal a day, I had some people saying to me, for as often as you train, for the things that you're doing, is that enough food? They told me you should probably track what you're eating. Tracking hunger, I feel, is a great idea. I feel like tracking hunger, in my opinion, is better than tracking calories or macros. But I started tracking my calories, and I'm telling you, on a regular basis, I was getting 1,700 calories a day, 1,800 calories a day. And that just isn't enough for me and what I do. So that's when I started incorporating, the 5-2-2, and noticed I had more energy. I was actually leaning out even more so. But one thing that I will say, and I guess if we get into maybe contraindications to fasting, that I noticed when I was doing the strict 1 meal a day, and I did that for such a long time, was a little bit of a negative that I got was I was having like these odd muscle fasciculations. I was having these twitches in my calves, and I thought, is this a mineral thing? And I was adding more salt. I was doing potassium, magnesium, and it helped a little bit. But I'm telling you, when I ate more food, it went away. I haven't had it in a long time. So that's kind of how I'm doing it right now, and it's working for me.
Yeah. And so talk about when you would work out, because a lot of people, think, okay, if I'm going to just eat 1 meal a day, then when am I going to work out? What's the right time to work out? So for me personally, I like to work out in the morning. I'm a morning person. If you don't get me to work out in the morning, you might as well forget it, because I'm not working out at night. I'm too tired by the end of the night. So I work out, and I'm doing heavy weights in the morning. And I'm, right now for this last 3 weeks, I'm just eating 1 meal a day.
Yes.
So I'm not eating. I usually am eating around 5 o'clock, because by 5, I'm really hungry. And so at 5 o'clock, I'm eating. And then I'm waking up in the morning, going to the gym at either 5 or 6 a.m. the next morning. So talk about the workout schedule. And, people say, well, if you aren't eating after you're working out, then you might be destroying muscle. Talk about that.
So first, I am definitely a fan of earlier time-restricted feeding than later time-restricted feeding. And I know that that's not practical for a lot of people. For me, for the longest time, I said to myself, when I'm done with my day, if I come home, if my meal was typically at 6 o'clock, 6:30. My thing was I didn't want to eat past 7 p.m. But and I follow a lot of very smart people, and it seems that if it's practical for you, and it is in my case, that if you eat earlier, it's a little bit more beneficial. And I can tell you again, just my own anecdote, the earlier I ate my meal, the better it was for me overall. So, but as far as the workout window, and I think about what they call the anabolic window, I think that is a lot larger than people think. A lot of people used to say, once you're done training, you got to rush. You got to pound the protein shake. You got to speed home to get the meal in. I think that we're given a little leeway on that. Some people say up to 4 hours. I'll buy that. But you do have to refuel for sure. You don't want to be breaking down lean tissue. That's obviously counterproductive. But typically what I do, so I do resistance training. I'll do a combination of weights. I'll go to the gym, or I'll do body weight stuff. But I also train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I do that 4 to 5 times a week. And I always train fasted. I experimented with trying to eat a little bit something before I train, whether it was weights or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it's just the idea for me, maybe it's a mental thing of having food in my stomach when I'm trying to train. It just doesn't work for me. So I train about midday, except on the weekends, it's earlier in the day. So I would say if I'm 1 meal a day, if I'm 1 meal a day, my meal is about 3 p.m. That's my 1 meal. And if I'm doing, the 16-8, obviously it's pushed back a little bit. But I like to give myself really no longer than 2 to 3 hours after I train to make sure that I eat. That's kind of my rule on that one. Because like you said, if you go too long, then you're breaking down lean tissue. What's the point of that?
Hey guys, I want you to know what I've been doing for my health that is absolutely transforming it. I'm taking massive amounts of vitamin C. Now, it's not just the regular vitamin C. This is 100% natural, and it only contains natural sources, whole foods like amla berry, camu berry, cherry. So it's literally just ground up fruits and massive amounts, and it delivers 750% of your daily recommended vitamin C. So I literally double it, and I have just seen so many benefits. So go to chantelrayway.com/vitamin C to get yours today. Got it.
Yeah.
And what about people who maybe say, okay, I'm going to have one meal a day? I've seen people who say, okay, I'm having one meal a day, but I'm going to have a protein shake after I work out. So I'm basically having one meal and then a small protein shake, after I work out.
I think that that's perfectly fine, to be honest. Again, if the point, what's interesting about intermittent fasting is there are a lot of benefits to it. And I think that sometimes people can run away with a lot of these things, like autophagy. People talk a lot about autophagy, and when you go extended periods of time without food, that ramps up autophagy, or our cellular cleaning process. But what's interesting is exercise can do that. You don't have to stop eating to quote unquote ramp up autophagy. You could eat a decreased calorie diet and not intermittent fast, sleeping well. So we want to make sure that we're being accurate here, when we talk about autophagy and the reasons why that we're restricting our eating window. Now, I think for things like insulin sensitivity, for things like hormones like ghrelin and insulin, I think these are all positive things that come along with intermittent fasting. But if you haven't eaten in 13 or 14 hours and you train and you have a protein shake shortly thereafter, it's certainly not going to be a hindrance to you. And I find no problem with that at all.
Now, I know that on your website, you had said that you had suffered from some severe digestive issues, and that's kind of what brought you into this functional medicine route.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your own personal issues and what you did to kind of heal some of your digestive issues.
Sure. So long story short, I basically, I remember when I was in undergraduate school, I carried around a gallon of milk with me everywhere that I went because I had terrible, terrible reflux. And looking back, I didn't eat well, and I didn't know any better. I ate what they served in school. And that kind of continued on, and it improved a little bit into my 20s. Like I told you, when I was bodybuilding, my bodybuilding diet when I was cutting for a show was basically, chicken, rice, and broccoli. I ate that 7 times a day. So it improved a little bit. But even into my 30s, my early 30s, I was still dealing with some of these things. I feel very fortunate that I was kind of led where I was, and I learned a lot of, or at least I was set on the path early, in my career, in school. And I feel very fortunate about that. But you start reading about things like the ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, and you read success stories about people with their reflux or, their GI issues and how they're improved. So I switched to a low carb, and I was, like I said, back and forth, keto, low carb, and those things seem to improve it. I saw my skin improve. I never really had issues with that, severe issues, but I saw minor improvements with my skin. But I'll tell you what, about 3 years ago, I got on Twitter, and one of the very first people that I followed was Sean Baker. And he was talking about the carnivore diet. And then you start reading about other people that had tried it and all the benefits that they had. And at this point, even on a ketogenic diet, a very strict ketogenic diet or a paleo diet, even if I ate more carbohydrates, I never really ate any grain. Excuse me. So I started the carnivore diet. Excuse me. In a week, those remaining GI issues were gone completely in 1 week.
Wow.
And I stayed on the carnivore diet strict for about 15 months. And then I started introducing some things back. Now I'm pretty much, I still eat plenty of meats, but I have introduced back things like avocado. I can eat artichoke, zucchini, cucumber, mushrooms, things like that. But pretty much anything else, cruciferous vegetables, nightshades, does me terrible. So that's kind of, my transition there. But for me, with the GI stuff that I had going on, carnivore diet was the thing that did it for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little. I saw on your website that you help work with people who have autoimmune issues. And I know we have a lot of people listening on our podcast that have autoimmune issues. So talk about how intermittent fasting helps autoimmune issues and what are some of the other things you can do to really heal those white blood cells and get your immune system back on track.
So I think that if there's a hierarchy, and let me tell you my thoughts on health in general. I don't think, I guess in our business, you run into a lot of hyperbole, and everybody wants one thing to be the cause of everything and one thing to be the cure of everything. And nutrition is a very attractive topic. It's a very important topic. And I understand why people are why they like it. It's interesting. But nutrition, in my opinion, is only a piece of the pie, right? But in the hierarchy, we always like to start there. So let's look at your lifestyle. Our first consultation with anybody we sit down with is about 2.5 hours. We look at everything. We ask them everything from, what do you eat to how many amalgam fillings do you have in your mouth? How many mercury fillings do you have?
I just got I had 2 little ones and I got them taken out. So
perfect. That a girl. That's perfect. So what I'm saying is, so maybe in a case, that's what we're talking about. So,
hey guys, I don't know about you, but if you are just feeling so tired throughout the day and just feeling restless at night, then I want you to try something called Energy Bits. Each package has spirulina or chlorella algae. They're plant-based and they have 0 sugar, 40 nutrients, 5 grams of protein. And so you are going to feel great taking them. So go to energybits.com and then you'll get 20% off if you put the promo code Chantel. That's Chantel.
We go through the process. When we sit down with somebody on day one, we're not telling them, okay, change this with your food. Go make an appointment with a biological dentist and have your amalgams removed. Change all of your cleaning products at your house. Switch your toothpaste. We're not doing that on day one. And the hierarchy, we always start with what they're eating first, right? I am a huge fan. We have a saying that we do not guess, we test. I am a fan of labs. We always make sure we're checking to see what's going on. So with that being said, we look at potential food issues first, right? See how they do with that. Then we look at other factors. What could do you have amalgam fillings? Do you have co-infections? Do you have mold, right? So I sat with a patient this morning. He sat for treatment for an hour and a half with us. He's had to build a new house because his workplace and his old home was so full of mold. He got extraordinarily sick. It infiltrated his lungs. He was in rough shape. So I think that my general answer is try to look at all the potential stressors, because I believe in this day and age, there's not just one, right? I grew up in an area, and I still live in an area. I live right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where, this is a big mill town. That's what this area was. Not so much anymore. But, we have environmental things. We have what's going on in our air. I don't know we can control that, but we always look at, okay, let's look at potential food sources. Great. Let's look at what you're putting on your skin. Let's address that. And I am more of a fan of removing things than I am of adding things. In other words, people call us all the time and they'll say, because we do chelation, IV chelation for people who have high heavy metals. And we always test for this stuff. We don't ever guess. So people will say, hey, listen, I want to come in. I want to do this IV chelation. And we'll sit down with them. And do you have amalgam fillings in your mouth? Yes. Are you considering having them removed? Probably not. Well, then this isn't going to be any help. This isn't going to help you, right? Mm-hmm. So my point is, I think that you have to address if you can, right? So we have a team of people, MDs, we have DCs, we have NPs, we have RNs, we have a team of people that we can address a lot of these needs. So I think, again, this is a long-winded answer. You have to address the potential stressors, but maybe not all at once. But we start with food and we kind of go from there.
So what would be some symptoms if someone thinks that mold might be a problem? Like, is there any mold companies that are like franchises that are all over that you would say, I recommend, getting this? Or how would someone go about checking to see, like, that guy, how did he know that he had mold in the house? Like, did you see mold in his gut, or what was going on?
Well, for him specifically, he had been to a lot. He happens to be an MD, by the way. And he started having symptoms of brain fog, very forgetful. As a matter of fact, when he first started coming to see us, he had to have his brother bring him because he couldn't remember how to get to our clinic, even though he had been there several times before. He just couldn't remember, and he lived close. So he had the symptoms of that. He had seen a bunch of doctors before he even came to see us. Matter of fact, he just came to us for treatment. He knew going in, but before he came to see us, what was going on. So he had been diagnosed with the labs, and I think his home situation, and you can have your homes tested to confirm that. But in his case, he noticed it where he was practicing. Like I said, this guy's a physician. Where he was practicing, the building he was practicing in, apparently, I never saw the place, had mold, and also his home. So now he's kind of splitting time from Arizona and Pittsburgh here because he just feels better out there. So he had typical symptoms, brain fog, forgetfulness, chronic fatigue, thyroid issues that come along with that. Now, that doesn't mean if somebody has those symptoms that they necessarily have a mold issue. In just his case, that he did. So, in my opinion, in this day and age, I feel like the big ones that people really are talking about are infections, heavy metals, things like that, mold, co-infections, and things like that.
Parasites.
Yes, things like that. So, I tell people you can have your homes tested where you work test to see what it is, but in some cases, I'll be honest with you, some people manage this stuff well, right? I have people that even with like Lyme disease, we see a lot of Lyme. People can kind of manage it well with like their lifestyle. Some people need a little bit more than that. But in his case, it was severe. And so what we're doing is we kind of changed with him. We changed what he was eating. He's obviously doing the things that he should be doing. He thinks he should be doing. He's building a new home. He moved. He's spending time out west where he can get more sun. It's cleaner out there. And then, he sees us for treatment to help him out. He's doing a lot better. It's just going to be a longer road for him.
I don't know about you, but all my friends like to enjoy a nice glass of wine after a long, stressful day. But the problem is that all these wines have so many harmful chemicals like pesticides and way too much sugar. If you're going to drink wine, you should drink Dry Farm wines. Their wines are all natural and additive free, and they are tested for purity, sugar-free, and low alcohol. So you can have the great taste of good wine without all those extra chemicals. And as a special gift, if you sign up with our link at chantelrayway.com/wine, you can get a bonus bottle of natural wine for just $1. So have that extra bottle of wine for $1. Go to chantelrayway.com/wine or just click the show notes and you'll see the link right there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about metabolic conditions, where you've seen people who say, look, I'm really stalled. I'm doing intermittent fasting. I'm doing one meal a day. Maybe I'm checking how many calories I'm eating. I'm, not overdoing it, but I'm still stalled and not losing weight. What are some tips that you have for people that you would say, these are some things that I've seen worked really well to kind of reset their metabolic state?
Absolutely. So if we're under the assumption that somebody is stable and they don't have off the charts blood glucose, fasting blood glucose, or anything like that, there's no contraindication for them for maybe changing things up. One of the biggest things that I have found that works typically well for people if they're on a stall, if they are in fact, they're sticking to their eating window, they're keeping their macros, their calories where they should be. And as an aside, real quick too, I think that calories matter, right? But I think that controlling calories happens easier when you're controlling hunger. If you're eating foods that keep you satisfied longer, you're, as a side effect, reducing calories. But I'm not somebody that thinks that calories are irrelevant. But potentially introducing or changing things up, like in my case. So let's say, for example, somebody's on one meal a day and they've been doing that for a while, maybe let's say 3 or 4 months, and they lost, let's say 30 pounds in 4 months doing one meal a day. And all of a sudden it stops. And let's assume that they have more fat to lose. One of the things, if we're just talking about food, that we like to do is have them eat more. We'll say, okay, take 1 day a week where you're eating 3 meals, 2 meals, 3 meals. Just eat more food. And I think that we were talking, about adaptive thermogenesis. If you go long enough in a deficit, in a severe deficit, your body will adapt to that. And it's because it's like a thermostat. And I believe that our bodies are more like thermostats than we are scales. Our hormones aren't, our bodies are very smart, and it's going to adapt to, the stressors that we put on it. So that will be the first thing that I say. Now, second thing would possibly be, let's track and double check that you haven't, in fact, changed anything. A lot of times what happens is we call carb creep or maybe like fat creep. I love those terms where people, they're doing really well, right? They're losing weight and they're doing really, really well. And occasionally, and I can only tell you this because we ask people sometimes to track, they'll start introducing a little bit more food. Usually it's carbohydrates. And because they are doing well, and I'll ask people, when we look at these things, okay, so I see, Mary, over the past 2 weeks, you've gone from about 20 grams of carbohydrates a day to about 80. And this is kind of where they're coming in. So that could be a potential issue. People get comfortable, they're losing, they, either subconsciously or not, that they're maybe just eating more food. Typically it's carbohydrates or even fat. I had a woman, this happened last week. She stalled. And what happened was she started with no dairy and she introduced dairy. And I asked her, are you eating anything different? She said, yeah, I started eating dairy again, putting cream in my coffee, and I started eating cheese. And I said, okay, that's potentially why this is happening. Why did you do that? She said, well, because I was losing weight and I like cheese and, I'm on a kind of a ketogenic diet, and it's working well for me. So I said, okay, cut the cheese back out. And she started losing weight again. So sometimes it's just a matter of you're just carb or fat creep. But typically besides that, unless we're talking about something like, thyroid disease or autoimmune thyroid, if there's something serious, going on, I've seen people that don't eat for days that actually gain weight. I've seen a patient with Cushing syndrome, things like that. So there are pathologies that can do that. But in most cases, when people are losing routinely and they kind of hit a wall, I tell them either first things, and these typically work, well, eat more, take a day a week where you're eating more, or let's track and see if there's anything going on. Those typically 95% of people, it works well.
Yeah, I love that idea because I think it's funny because I was thinking I had done for a while ago, I had done one meal a day. And then I did one day where I did 2 meals a day. And then I did one meal where I had 3 meals a day. And then the day after, I didn't see the scale move. The day that I ate 3 meals, the very next day I lost 3 pounds. And I was thinking, wow, it was something that kind of triggered it. So that kind of 5-day, 1 meal a day, then 2 meals, and then, eating 3 on that last day, I personally can say that really worked well for me.
Yeah. And even one more thing I'm thinking about too, sometimes, and again, this is why I feel like it's important for people to pay attention to these things. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, I am a fan. I realize it's not practical for everybody, and I'm not hard and fast about this, but I do think, and I've read enough. I'm obviously not an expert in circadian rhythms. I don't claim to be. But from what I've read, from what I understand, the early time restricted feeding, all things being considered, is a little bit more beneficial. So sometimes if people do have a later window, we'll say, is it possible that you can move it back? Can you be done eating by 3 or 4 p.m. instead of 8 p.m.? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not practical, and I get it. Like I said, we're not hard and fast about that, but sometimes that's something else too that helps. But what's interesting too, you mentioned the 3 meal thing. So full transparency here, my wife and I, we are on the straight and narrow with our nutrition 99% of the time, admittedly, but we do take vacation meals. They are very few and far in between. But I'll tell you this, if I eat something that I typically wouldn't eat, whether it's a lot of healthy food or food that I typically wouldn't eat, what's interesting is I'm always 2 days later, I'm always lighter. I'm always lighter. If I eat more, which again, I'm lighter. I'm just lighter. So it works.
So true. It's so true. I just had a guy who works with me, and he just said this. He's like, "You're not going to believe this." He's like, "I was on a stall." He's like, "Last night I had a hankering. I can't remember, maybe Five Guys burgers and fries."
Uh-huh.
He's like, "I just had a hankering for it." He's like, "I got on the scale the next day." He's like, "I lost weight." And
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times, because it's like, you're clean, you're clean, you're clean, you're clean. Something happens to kind of shock your body.
Yes. They did that with us in bodybuilding too. They told us, now they were planned, they were tracking our body fat. And, if everything was going well, the guy that I was working with said, "Hey, listen, take this Sunday." And he said, "Eat as much of what you want the entire day." Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I always lost weight.
One of the things I loved on your website is that you state on there, autoimmune disease doesn't happen overnight. And it's the result of kind of years of emotional, physical, and chemical stress. So talk a little bit more about that. So like for me, I will say I still struggle with psoriasis. So I have a little bit of psoriasis here on my forehead. I have like 2 other spots. And it's funny because when I go on vacation, if we go to Florida or we go to Miami, I'm getting, a lot of sun and my psoriasis goes away. And then I'll come back and I tell my husband, I'm like, I just cannot seem to beat my psoriasis. It just is this kind of ebbs and flows. I get it and then it goes away. And then I'll do an extended fast. Like if I do a 5-day fast, my skin looks like a baby's butt. I mean, it just looks so good and it's great, but it's hard to be doing those kind of extended fasts all the time.
Yes.
And then here lately, like I just got this huge rash underneath my armpit, and it was just a big patch of psoriasis. And so talk a little bit about what do you think that is when it's kind of going, it's ebbs and flowing? Do you feel like it is just, the emotional, physical, and chemical stress that's kind of people are bringing on?
I think that's it 100%, and maybe it's one of those, maybe it's 2, maybe it's all of those. But interestingly about the sun, whenever you had mentioned the patches, when I go to the beach, I notice that my nails grow faster. My hair grows faster. I feel like one of the biggest lies we've been fed in healthcare is that the sun is harmful for us. I think that, intermittent burning can be potentially harmful. Don't get me wrong. But safe sun exposure is unbelievable. I believe it's one of the most, it's free. I don't know where you are, where I am.
I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Okay.
It's cold here right now.
Yeah, it's like 28 here too. So I'm in Pittsburgh, right? And 6 months out of the year here, the sun is gone, right? If I wake, I try to catch a sunrise every morning, look at it, and when it's clear. So I get it. It's tough to get good sunlight here. So the thing about it is the sun obviously is healing. Is it vitamin D or is it the spectrum? What is it? And I think it's everything. So I think that that's a huge thing too, right? Vitamin D, the proper types of rays that you want, obviously from the sun, but also too, as we're talking about this, and I don't know that this, correlates to, skin stuff. I've read that it can be, but if we're assuming that our nutrition is on point, maybe there isn't a couple of things that's sneaking in that could be potentially affecting our skin. Like I know a few people that had some minor skin things going on, psoriasis, eczema. They went full carnivore and it cleared it up. I don't know that happens for everybody, right? But maybe there are emotional things that go on. It's like hives, people get stressed out, they can break out in hives. So maybe there's that involved too. Chemical stuff, chemical exposure things. I know certain fragrances, topical things, creams can do that too. So maybe there's that. Maybe we have to look at what we're putting on our skin, but also blue light, fake light at night. So these glasses I have on, these are not prescription glasses. These are glasses for me to look at technology during the day. So at nighttime, when it turns night, I wear blue blocking glasses. the effect. And one thing I tell you more than anything the past maybe year or so, I've been following more people and reading more on is the effect of blue light at night, how it affects our circadian rhythms, our hormones, everything. And I got to tell you, I mean, it's really, really shocking to me that this is kind of like the first I'm hearing about this stuff. Nobody told me about this when I was younger.
Right.
So I think that plays a role too. So I think, to your point, and I think you said it best, I think it's a combination of all three, right? Physical, emotional, chemical. And I guess the real question is, how do we identify it and how do we get rid of it? How do we know? That's the $1 million question.
Right.
So
I love it. Well, this has been so much fun. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Great. Thank you. So I am on twitter.com at Dr. N. Greiner. And that's the only social media that I'm on. And also our website is greinerhealthsolutions.com. And there you can find information about what we do, about us, and all kinds of good stuff on there.
Awesome. And you guys stay with us. We'll have another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.